Hello, this is January high stakes overview, and the high stakes regular Avr0ra will help us. Alexei, hello. Hi everyone. It would seem that year 24 has just begun, and we already have the hand of the year, the call with 10 high, as Enlight once did against Federal Holds.
Oh my god, did he just call with 10 high?
Wow, show everyone, this 10-9 high is sick. Sick.
Oh
sick,
my
sick.
goodness.
And these are two new faces at the high stakes, at least for me. Please tell us about these guys, and is there any reason to call with 10 high at any time? Yes, pads attracted a lot of attention to this hand on Twitter. It was discussed a lot on 2+2. Chris Nguyen is, one might say, a new young player. We didn't really discuss him in our videos. He recently started playing high stakes. I assume he is friends with many German players. Maybe he's German or Austrian himself, I don't know exactly. But the first time I heard of him was about a year ago, when he asked me to change money. And in fact, that's when I found out his WPN nickname. Now he's already actively playing GG. As far as I know, he is 21 years old or something, and he played a very beautiful hand. It actually looks crazy, but if there's observers do not quite understand that due to the specifics of straddles and restraddles, the game is played with an effective stack of 12 BB. It means that the hand has actually been played with 12 BB stacks, because as you understand, it's hard to make a big mistake in terms of the big blind per 100 when the effective stacks are only 12 big blinds. His opponent is a player from Russia. It seems to me that he's not a professional player, but he definitely has a professional background. I'm sure of that. I played a lot with him. He gave a lot of action in January. He appeared on GG not long ago. He plays expensive tournaments, plays expensive cash games, and plays 20 to 40k reg wars. In other words, in very strong lineups. And in general, he is not an amateur player, I'm sure of this, and it is clear that he definitely has a professional background. You can see it by bet sizings. At least he has studied poker theory before. But it's still noticeable that Espelon plays more for fun, because who exactly is he playing with and how he chooses limits to play, so it's more likely that he's having fun. We can only guess whether people can beat the GG game with 12 VB effective depth. The answer, it seems to me, is on the surface, so to speak. Yes, I think they were mainly playing for fun. That is, I think that Chris, when he played with Espelon, he was sure that he was playing with a regular, and in this way people, one might say, fight for the table. They are trying to make the game more expensive, but here Chris didn't know who he was playing with. A man plays 40,000 with Linus and the others, you definitely won't crush him with money. This is an unusual spot, this is a heads up, but the one in position here is the one who puts the last straddle. Accordingly, this is Chris. In other words, Chris will be in position. The effective stack is 12 BB, but Espelon will raise first. It turns out that it is, roughly speaking, the same as Big Blind versus SB in 3 max or 6 max. SB raises, BB calls, and on a flop with 12 BB stack, SB Espelon bets first. Approximately, visually, it may be difficult, but it is approximately BB against SB with a 12 BB stack. And the action turned out to be quite interesting. Why is this hand cool? Why is it, for example, a cooler hero call than the one Enlight did against Federal Holds? Because Chris doesn't just call bad bet with 10 high, trying to catch bluffs. He calls a conned bet on the flop, which is actually a dubious play on the ace-queen-ace texture. Let's just say it's probably even bad. On a turn he receives a check from his opponent and goes to bluff his hand, well, just apparently to knock out some random equity. It's already good to knock out some kind of hand like 5-4, well, or knock out 9-4. He bets less than one big blind there. They have one blind of $400 and he bets 325. The bet is less than the blind. Espelon decides not to fold. He responds with a raise, because in his eyes apparently his opponent is representing almost nothing, and then Chris begins to think, what hand will he check raise here? A queen he'll bet on a turn, or even if he slow plays he'll check call. He doesn't represent anything, and Chris, instead of throwing away his bluff, goes to the end and calls down with 10 high. Well, the hand is absolutely crazy. but there is some logic in it. This sounds crazy, but again, remember that these are 12BB effective stacks. Most likely the opponents have no aces. Any of his AX, Espelon should have shoved pre-flop. Conventionally, AX, Chris should have shoved pre-flop too. Most likely a rumble is going on here using garbage hands, and basically each of the opponents represents nothing. That is, here Espelon in general does not pretend to have anything with his check raise, and Chris in his call plus bet line also depicts it very narrowly. Chris pretends to have a weak queen, which perhaps is not even necessary to bet with. In general, both rivals portray very narrowly, and the winner is the one who goes as far as possible to the end. And here it was Chris, who sort of closed the action and won with 10 high. Perhaps this is really the hand of the year. This is a crazy bluff that does not represent anything, and a call with nothing, and a win with 10 high. By the way, one more question. Espelon plays without a real name on GG, and who, in your opinion, is the best player on GG who plays regularly, but does not have a real name yet? That is, he has a really bad run. I guess I know your answer. A very simple question. Obviously Davy Jones, the strongest, one of the strongest players in the world, who is unlucky on GG. He has lost quite a lot there, and he has no real name. So probably Davy Jones, obviously. Basically they give real names very quickly now. In general, if you see a player without a real name, then most likely he plays not so good. The only exception is Davy Jones, or for example in the case when the player has just started playing on GG. He hasn't played there before. Maybe they will give it to him, maybe not, but it's not important. The point is that if player has been playing for a long time at high stakes and hasn't been given a real name, then most likely he's not playing super well. And the only exception is, of course, Davy Jones. And if Davy is given a real name on the GG, it means he won everything again from everyone, and I'm against it. So let's continue about Chris. He did not rejoice over his magnificent hero call for long, because he got caught playing heads up with another player from Russia, Gia Yakobishvili. We could say Gia took revenge for Espelon. Gia plays regularly. Overall, Gia played a lot in January, actively streamed on Twitch. He has been given a streamer account on GG. He has a link to the stream in his profile. Unfortunately, the stream records are not saved, but you can subscribe and watch his high-stakes battle online. He gives action to everyone, plays from 5k to 100k with the strongest players in the world, sometimes successfully, sometimes not. And here one might say he sent the young athlete home to 2k NL and below, because they were playing 10k NL. I think they even played 10k and 20k. And Gia won a lot from him. And it all ended with a magnificent hero call with ace high, where Gia called an expensive bluff from Chris in a 300BB pot. Again, Chris portrayed it rather narrowly. Chris check raised the flop, overbet the turn, overbet shoved the river, and represented only a full house. I watched Gia live on stream. Gia said that the person basically did not represent anything except a full house. We could go to showdown with almost everything. He had a lot of bluffs. Gia didn't want to fold, so he called. He called and Chris finished the game immediately. Apparently, he had no money for rebuy. As this often happens in poker, unfortunately for Gia, he was able to beat Chris, but let's say at 100,000 NL against one of the strongest players, Taisto Janter, it didn't work out for him. He made a super expensive bluff without equity and received unexpected, incredible, you can also say a call out of ranges with King 7. That is, in a very non-obvious situation. Very unclear how Taisto found this hero call, because this was really such a tough call, but it turned out he was right. That is, Gia was bluffing out of ranges, and in other words, it was such a rather harsh punishment because the opponent did not fold the hand that he should have folded. He could have folded it on all streets, except perhaps the flop. In general, I can note that this is Taisto's signature feature. His hero calls in big pots He does it very well, no joke. I've been playing with him for a very long time, since the days of active play on PokerStars. I can note that Taisto always chooses situations for a hero call very well. I'm a person who in general is not a super aggressive player. Well, it's clear that I have quite a lot of expensive bluffs in my game, but Taisto just slams me every other time. Every time I decide to make an expensive bluff against Taisto, he always finds a very thin call. And this, one might say, is his strength. Definitely his strong point. He senses very well situations where opponents are bluffing, well, when they decide to bluff expensively. And he kinda showed his skill in this situation, because in general the river call was okay here, but probably the most non-obvious moment was when he called 3/4 bet on a turn. And I think it was a big assumption, because this call could have been a total disaster if his interpretation of Gia's range had been incorrect. And he hadn't garbage hands, most likely he hadn't. Because just look at the texture, a lot of monster draws, huge amount of combo draws. All of it wouldn't make the call with King 7 a good decision. There are a billion value combos that will always play straight, a million hands with strong equity. To make this call on a turn, you need to assume your opponent has bluffs with absolutely no equity in his range. Actually, that's exactly what happened in this hand. That is, Taisto's assumption turned out to be correct, and it was very subtle. This was actually a very tough call. I agree, and in general, this is a very interesting part of his game, because I remember how you played a reg war with Enlight and Munoz about a year ago. Enlight kept calling your bets and did not see a single bluff. And Taisto, as I understand it, sees you bluffing from time to time at least. And this makes me think, so to speak, why do you show bluffs to him, but not to our dear Victor? Let's keep this a secret. In the last video you have talked about Davis' strong side, that he's very good at fast play with value hands, where it is necessary. I also remembered then that we had been analyzing hands with Costa Gambler, and Costa had told me the same thing about Davis' fast play. Moreover, I know for sure that you and I definitely have not discussed it yet. Is it so obvious? To be honest, I don't remember. Maybe it was me who told Kostya about this. Most likely, as it often happens in poker, in any sport and probably in life in general, like one famous quote says, "I fear not the person who makes 1,000 different blows. I fear the one who makes one simple blow, but very well." And here it's the same, even though probably it doesn't sound very difficult. However, this skill can be practiced for a long time. That is, this one might say is also Davis' signature feature. Undoubtedly, he does it very well in the right situations. And as it often happens, everyone knows about it, but they can't do anything about it. This is his signature blow, which everyone is aware of, but everyone gets knocked out by it. It's like Pereira in the UFC, if you know. Or the similar story with Manny Pacquiao in boxing. It's all about the same. Everyone understands what they should be wary of, but they still lose. Of course, this is not the only strong aspect of Davis' game. Overall, he's a very balanced and good player. However, we can say that at fast play of strong hands in suitable situations he performs really great. I agree, this is his signature feature, because, as it often happens, you study someone else's database, see a cool feature and, of course, go try it immediately. And it so happens that I just always look at the nuts. It's like you're sitting there thinking he has a combo draw, shove your medium value, see the nuts and so on. That's why you're not Dave. It's worth noting that Taisto, in general, just like Davey, started the year very well and played quite actively. You can see that Taisto is in 6th place. He has won 200,000 in pure EV. It's a good result. And since we're talking about players' signature moves, I think it would be interesting to hear. So, here we have the top 10 of the month. And I know that Marcus Ladev inflates the pots, Barak always has the nuts, but jokes aside, what signature move does each of players have, in your opinion? This, of course, will be a little exaggerated, but probably we can really highlight the strong sides of each player. Probably we can highlight the strongest one. That is, it will probably even be objective in some sense. In 10th place we have Tobias Dauthweiler, who played actively in January. In general, his last year did not end very well. He lost a lot from his peak, so he started this year working hard. Apparently he set goals for himself. Basically, I would know that he played cheaper and tried to play 5k more. Talking about the strong side of Tobias, we can probably highlight, well, this may coincide a lot with someone, but we can highlight his expensive bluffs in straight lines. It feels like he loads quite a lot of money using such straight lines like bet over bet all in or check raise bet all in. So in general he plays such lines very frequently, and usually there are not only a lot of value but also a lot of bluffs. He tries to put his opponent into an all-in situation, perhaps in a way. Well, some players like some kind of 200 IQ lines, some kind of check raise and then big overbet. For example, the next player, Tex here. This is exactly what he likes. That is some sort of non-standard delayed line when the opponent does not expect an all-in and then suddenly he gets put into this kind of situation. And Tobias, he seems to do this in a much more direct way. In other words, an opponent expects an all-in from him on a river, but still, Tobias does it correctly, balances his ranges with value hands very wisely, chooses bluffs with blockers in order to ideally block opponents' calls and unblock their faults. And this is probably his strong side, at least that's what immediately comes to my mind. To be honest, I did not prepare for these questions, therefore this is, so to say, a little improvisation. However, I think players who have played a lot with Dude 1, this is Tobias's nickname on Stars, will agree with me that he perhaps plays such straight lines more often than the average reg. He puts opponents into all-in situations by such plays more often than the average reg of these limits. In 9th place we have Tex here. Last year, or to be more precise, at the end of the last year, it seems to me that he took more rest and lost his shape. He has already appeared at the tables this year. And I'll be honest with you, Kevin is probably the most mysterious player for me. To be honest, I don't understand what he's doing. He's good because probably his strong point is the ability to make very subtle faults. In other words, this is a player who does not pay anything. For me, such players are the most difficult opponents, because you pay them but they don't pay you. The game becomes harder for you. You need to somehow correctly find spots for overbluffing. How to do this is also not so obvious, because he may only wait for these moments where it is necessary for you to bluff. In situations where you do have bluffs, he will do good calls there. That is, he's a difficult opponent and it's hard to highlight something special. Perhaps it will be the same that I have mentioned earlier, the ability to put you into an all-in unexpectedly. But probably we could see this ability among the other players in this list too. This is not some kind of unique feature. Overall, Kevin is probably the toughest opponent on this list for me, in terms of understanding what he can do. There was an interesting hand with him in January, let me show it. There was another expensive game with Mr. Colorfull, this is famous Chinese VIP amateur. And here it's also unclear what Mr. Kevin is doing. Well, it's okay to raise off the ranges from the button. For example, when the amateur is on the big blind, we want to open wider from the button. That is the right strategy. But why does he 4-bet him after that? And why does he go all in? Basically, having low equity on this texture, where there are a million strong draws which dominate him, he'll just go having 2 or 3 outs against a pair with a flush draw, maybe a little more, considering that he has a gut shot. Why even 4-bet a VIP player who almost never folds to 4-bets? Well, he does fold, let's say with great reluctance. All in all, I don't always understand what Kevin is doing, but the fact remains, perhaps we're just leveling, and the answer is simpler. Kevin is simply not in shape right now, but the fact remains that I don't quite understand how he constructs ranges. In my opinion, this hand is just a poorly played hand. It seems to me that the turn all-in has negative EV. Well, can't bet on the flop is probably good, that is, if we ended up in this situation, the flop continuation bet definitely was positive EV. With the ace of hearts, it's a good texture where all amateurs connectors have missed. In other words, this is surely the right can't bet, but the pre-flop 4-bet and this shove and turn, in my opinion, is quite dubious. I see Nacho in 8th place, and it's very good to see him, considering that last year did not go very well for him. And as far as I know, they are working on a game with Davy Jones. Well, Davy is one of the best players in the world objectively, and how is it possible that one partner is in the top 10 and the other is not doing so well? Although, well, I like Nacho as a player, and I think he's pretty strong and experienced player. Well, it's actually not that obvious how much they work together. I know that they were friends, but now it's not so obvious. Maybe now they are not, who knows. But indeed, Nacho had a very unsuccessful last year. He lost several million. Offline game was unsuccessful too, although he participated in all Tridents. Well, not all, but he took part in some Tridents and other expensive series. So it was a really bad year. And we're glad to see him on the list. Maybe this is not such a big result. By his standards, it's quite modest but still pleasant. As they say, a winner is a winner, so we congratulate Nacho. Answering your question, well, objectively, I think Nacho understands that he plays weaker than Davy Jones. Still weaker than Davy. At the same time, surprisingly, he plays weaker technically but more risky against stronger opponents in tougher lineups. Basically, Nacho plays without any selection with everyone, with almost everyone, and simultaneously. I would call him the Spanish Enlight, except that Enlight is still technically stronger, in my opinion. In addition, it seems to me Nacho has problems with psychological aspects too. You can see that this downswing, again, it is easy to play well when you are dealt cards well. When you are dealt poorly, it's very difficult to continue performing at the same high level. And I'm sure that if Nacho gets into a good run, gets into even better shape, well, maybe he will perform even better than both Davy and Enlight. But at the moment there were clearly a lot of technical mistakes in the game, and I think this was due to the bad run and poor psychology. Objectively, he got a little woozy. I saw sessions where he played, one might say, trying to win back in some sense. Therefore, the result. Well, this probably aggravated his unfortunate run, but nevertheless, this is a great guy himself. He's also very young, and I think he'll still get out of this downswing and crush it up, because again, he has everything to be a top high-stakes winner. Answering your question about the signature aspects of Nacho's game, it's probably worth mentioning the incredible amount of hands playing. Yes, this is a little different from what you might have expected, but play distance is very important. As Durdom once said, just practice very much. Although he spoke about the Rubik's Cube, this also applies to poker. This quote that Nacho could relate to. Probably if you take the past 5 years, Nacho will be the top 1 player in terms of hands played at high stakes. If we look at who played the most hands on 5KNL over the last 5 years in all rooms, Ignacio Moron will be in the first place. And this says a lot. Therefore, he must take advantage of it. He has this experience. Therefore, probably his strong point is his colossal experience, colossal playing distance. He has played many hands with each of his opponents. In addition, he can play a lot of tables simultaneously. This is also good. I suppose Nacho's strength is in his ability to play a lot and play unbelievable distances. In 7th place we have Linus, and there is such a legend about him that at least at his peak he was such an ideal adherent of GTO. I remember even on the Gypsy team there was an article where they analyzed his hand in which he had called 1.5 combinations, some very unobvious ones. It matched the solver and everyone was like, Linus learned everything there. Well, it's probably worth noting that Linus is not in 7th place, he is in 7th and 2nd place, and if you add it up, it turns out that he's in the 1st place. That's why Linus is truly our champion. As I already said, in the span of a year, Linus has gotten into crazy shape over the past. He started the year very poorly, but during the year, this is, also happens in chess when a player, it would seem that he has passed his peak and began to descend, and then somehow he gets a second wind, and perhaps something like this has happened to Linus. Linus is in the top form, maybe the best shape of his career. Answering about his signature aspects and the fact that he is a GTO genius, it seems to me that this is not so. I always thought it was a myth. Linus is he has quite a lot of exploits in his game. Even old Linus, who was supposed to be a GTO genius, had conventionally just an incredibly impudent split of bet sizing. That is, in some sizes he simply had no bluffs, in other he had only bluffs. In other words, how can such a player be a GTO genius? No, this is more of a person who simply understands very well how to pull plays and build his range correctly. He may be a GTO genius because, anyway, Linus understands the equilibrium very well, but in the game he deviates quite a lot. Linus had a very successful start in January. Yes, maybe he didn't play a long distance, but by his standards it was a normal distance. Believe me, he often sat in the lobby holding the highest tables. Great start of the year, I think he's pleased with the result. I have such nostalgic memories of Linus and GTO. I remember the story of his first limit climbing. He went to Malta and worked a lot there in Solver, allegedly at least, and now I realized that it was almost 10 years ago, or even more. Yes, time flies very fast, that's a fact. What exactly he was doing there in Malta, of course, no one will ever know. Nevertheless, Linus played a lot in those years and he got to the high stakes pretty quickly. I've already talked a lot about that in the interview. However, basically we can say that it was my efforts that got him there, because I lost a lot to Linus at 2k and 1k now, and I can say that I personally brought him to the high stakes. By the way, perhaps Linus's most important feature is not something very outstanding, but precisely the stability and the ability to maintain a high level performing over the years, because quite a lot of people have already ended their careers at the high stakes. Now, if we are talking about the strong side, probably, in my opinion, Linus is simply incredibly smart. In general, here they are, together with Baron. I think they just have a very high IQ. He's in generally a very good and strong logician. He understands how it should be, he understands the equilibrium well, and knows how to deviate from it. He has a lot of his own features in the game. He understands which sizes to use and where to overbluff and where not to bluff. I mean, he's actually just a very smart player. And now when he's in good shape, he's downright scary at the tables. Looking ahead, we will soon have an analysis of Linus's hands with Gypsy team, and there you can look in more detail. I don't know what kind of hands will be there at the analysis yet, but over the past year, especially over the last half, Linus had a lot of masterfully played hands. Taisto, as we have already mentioned, is in 6th place and he has had a great start of the year. Well, as we basically started with this and moved on to this topic, his strong point, I'm absolutely sure, is the expensive calls. That is, his percentage of successful expensive calls is off the charts. It's absolutely incredible. I think all in all, he's top 1 among the others. Well, it happens that he loses, of course. Perhaps this is due to selective memory, you know. But I remember a few against me personally. The call against Gia. I also remember he played against Linus at the 100 KNL in fallen apart table, and he got the stack from Linus the same way. It was also an expensive hero call with blockers. And I can tell you that Taisto's strong point is precisely the expensive bluff catchers. And we have a relatively new face in the top, or at least I don't remember him making it last year. Matthew Bergard, please tell us who this player is, because I'm looking at 23,000 hands, and even considering that it is filtered with 1 KNL inclusively, well, that's impressive by high stakes standard. Yes, there's actually a lot to be said about Matthew. He's been playing poker for quite a long time, let's say. And he has an interesting story. This is a young player, he's now 20-something years old. He started playing poker at almost 16, if not 15. Such a Canadian Mikey PR, and he started playing at PokerStars. I've even prepared something for you. He had the nickname P-Machine. Some small statistics on him have been preserved here. You see, last online 5 years ago, his journey ended ingloriously, he was banned. Everyone reported him because they suspected that he was playing with RTA and that his game was somehow suspiciously GTO oriented. To be honest, after a while, he sort of posted proof that he had been banned not for using RTA, but just for playing from someone else's account, because he was like under 18. It was true, he really was under 18 at the moment. Well, if we calculate, it turns out that he is around 23 now or some, maybe even less. Well, never mind. The fact is that according to the proof he provided, he was really banned not for having an RTA but for violating the age restriction. However, it was very suspicious. There were like moments because of which many were sure that P-Machine was somehow cheating, because there were several very suspicious patterns in his game, I remember, and people from our community strongly suspected him. And there were even people who tried to use some kind of special play against him, as against a bot, because in some situations his play seemed very inhuman. However, no one has any evidence. Well, now I think maybe there was some kind of obscure story there. Now he definitely plays fair. I'm sure of that, because at the moment his game is very far from equilibrium. So he ended his performance at Stars ingloriously. Next came a performance on WPN, the first attempt, let's call it that, the first attempt on GG and WPN. He played under a different nickname on GG, under the real name. He created an account using his friend's ID. As I understand it, he explained it by the fact that when he started playing there, he was also under 18 and blah blah blah. Eventually, he was banned there too. Both accounts, WPN and GG, were reported, and both were banned with confiscation. Accordingly, he has not yet been unbanned on WPN. He cannot play on WPN. On GG they banned that old account of his, but they allowed him to create a new one. So here is Matthew Bergard. This is his new account, which he has been using to play for the last couple of years. Accordingly, he only plays on GG. He cannot play on WPN, cannot play on Stars. He only plays on GG. He plays a lot. He was #1 in terms of the distance played last year. Plays well, plays strong, plays with everyone. I think he plays fair, at least now, over the past year. What he has done in his youth is no longer so obvious. This is the time now, you know, you can't be sure of anyone, if you know what I mean. But it seems to me that Matthew plays fair now. If you rank players in terms of the distance played for the last year, Matthew confidently takes the first place. That is, he not just takes, but confidently takes the first place. The difference there is almost 30%. Long story short, a big gap from second place. And the gap from the third place is even bigger. Accordingly, that is an incredible playing distance. An incredible playing distance playing with everyone. Don't be confused by the small win rate shown there. In fact, if you play mostly 5KNL with everyone, showing even such a win rate is an amazing result. It's funny that he has been given several warnings for bomb hunt. Based on this, we can assume that GG's bomb hunt determining system is poor. Because if a player has played the most hands by a large margin, well, he can't be a bomb hunter, because who is everyone else then? Who are all these people then? Even if I played 70,000, who's all... well, you probably won't show me scrolling, but the point is that who's everyone else if the #1, in their opinion, is a bomb hunter? The system is clearly not working well. However, it seems like the high-stakes community stood up for him a little, because the man has already suffered enough, because he has already been banned everywhere. It was not clear whether it was fair or not, but in my opinion, I'll be honest, playing under 18 is not some kind of brutal violation, just like playing with a VPN. After all, it doesn't violate any direct rules, therefore they probably harass poor young Matthew in vain. That's why we have, so to speak, stood up for him a little, and we hope that he will not be given any more warnings for bomb hunt. If we talk about Matthew's strong side, then it's probably playing distance. It's probably playing distance, I would say. Well, in general, about a year ago he played worse. He lost a lot to Enlight in heads up, but now he has begun to play much better. He has begun to make subtle faults, and in general now he is a very formidable opponent. He has excellent results, he controls the tables. To be honest, it's hard to say what his signature feature is, it's hard to say. It's possible, probably As I said about Kevin when I was talking about Tobias, that he is able to bluff in non-standard situations, where many people simply don't have bluffs. In other words, he tries to choose situations for bluff where the player pool as a whole does not bluff a lot. Yes, this is a very general phrase, I understand. You can say the same about many. Everyone is trying to do this. Any player tries to bluff where others call little to make it work better, but make you maybe better at this than others. This is probably how I would answer if you really forced me to choose something, but it's like not 100% true. Overall, it's again difficult for me to name his strength. Perhaps his strong point is that he's still very young. And in fourth place we have Barak, and anticipating the answer that Barak doesn't do anything bad at the tables, although this is actually a strong point, it would be interesting to find out what he does at the tables. Actually, yes, it also sounds very simple, but as I have said many times, the most complex things often sound simple. On the contrary, try to find a player whose database you will not find gross mistakes, straight up EV loss. It will take a lot of effort. Barak's game is very stable. Just stable, high quality game, as simple as it sounds, and still it's pretty far from simple. That's what he does well, which is to say he doesn't do crap. That is, try to catch him playing off the ranges. A crazy play off the ranges that didn't work or worked. You won't see Barak playing like that. That is, Barak plays more seamless, more logical poker. He bluffs where he seems to have a lot of value, where there are few bluffs. He chooses only the best. In fact, he has such a seamless, stable game without any bullshit. And this probably, in fact, makes him almost one of the best players in the world. From the outside, it seems to me that Barak actually has a very good learning ability, because it seems like he has started to play cash at the high stakes not so long ago, but at the same time we constantly see him in the tops. He is always one of the top winners there. Well, after all, in my opinion, objectively, Barak is dealt cards incredibly well. For a fact, you cannot have a win rate at 40k NL 20 BB per 100 hands. If you have such a win rate, most likely you are lucky. But here I agree with other strong players. It would be interesting to see Barak when they start dealing him cards the other way. Will his game melt down during a strong down streak? We'll see. No offense to Barak, just as a poker player, maybe a reviewer, a player too of course, I don't mind him getting into a down streak, but just as a person who analyzes the play of other strong professionals, I would like to see if Barak's games break or not. It just hasn't happened yet. It's easy to play when you are being dealt well. It's clear that when the strongest player is also being dealt 1.5 times more nuts, it is clear that he will crush everyone down. I would like to see him when he would be dealt fewer nuts than necessary, when his opponents would have a stronger flush, a flush into flush. We'll see. Barak plays actively, so we probably will see it this year. Maybe it will happen this year, who knows. Well, personally, Barak appeals to me. And by the way, talking about a flush into a flush, I remember once, many years ago, they said about one famous player that he was being dealt well. It was Baron. I vividly remember the story of the Invoker, who has researched Baron's database and did not understand how he constantly colored a flush into a flush. And then somehow he realized that here Baron knocked out the backdoor stronger, here Baron left the backdoors weaker. Maybe Barak has a similar story. I would like to believe that this is not just an upswing. Maybe, yes, you're telling me my story. It's funny, you know, when you talk to someone a lot. By the way, you don't even have to cut it. It's funny when, you know, they tell you your own stories, but in other words, and so on and so on. Soon I will tell you about when we were in Bertsk. And once I was walking through Bertsk and man came up to me, got to me and said that he could immediately see a native Bertsk resident in me by the face. Jason Gale, one of the strongest players in the world, ranked 3rd, has won a lot on WVN. Super top reg, again. Discussed him a lot in the last video. There is probably little point in repeating it. He plays Well, heads up, reg wars and full tables. I don't know if we could name this as a strong point, but he probably has the most non-standard bet sizes. He really likes some kind of low preflop sizings and underbets. That is, he tries to make the game as non-standard as possible, as much as possible, and somehow outplay his opponent. In other words, he is like Stefan, but only Stefan is now objectively in bad shape, but this man is in good shape. You could say that he took what was strong from Stefan and improved it. Therefore, probably his strong point is the ability to drive his opponent into some non-standard pots, non-standard SPRs. Here you are playing a 3-bet pot with him and you have some kind of a pot on a flop like 12 blinds. In situation, let's say BB versus button. And you've never been in this situation before. Usually there are either 20 BB or more, or some kind of a single raised pot with 6 BB, but somewhere in between you don't have such practice there at all, and you have little understanding about the ranges and what they look like, well, how exactly to implement equity. The SPR is very uncomfortable, as if it's neither here nor there. It's like you're sitting between two chairs, like they said in a well-known expression, and it's not clear what to do, but your opponent seems to suppress you during the hand. This is probably Gale's strong point, and Stefan does the same. That is, it's not like something new, but in my opinion Steph is not in the best shape right now. So it's a little easier to execute this playing with him. You can, so to say, always wait for some kind of a gift from Stefan, but you can't wait for it from Gale. In the first place, in pseudo first place, because in first, as I said, if you add it up, Linus will be the first. But in this table, in first place is Markus Ladiv, one of the strongest players from Estonia. So probably he, along with Taisto Janter, are probably the two strongest cash players from Estonia by a wide margin. And Markus had a very good year. He played expensive tournaments, played expensive cash games and did well. Even played 100 KNL. That is, as far as I know, he's selling his action. Nevertheless, he's still playing strongly. He is kind of a poker giga-chad, playboy philanthropist, and that is beats everyone and everywhere, both offline and online. And as they say, kudos to the great guy. Plays well, what can I say? He plays really strong, fights a lot for pots. He's also not afraid to bluff without equity. So, you know, probably everything like in the movies or just in the anime, everything was stolen from Evangelion, so the same in poker. Everyone stole everything from Stefan or Baron. It's probably the same here. Marcus's play is very flexible. That is, he's not afraid to play hard and look like a fool, because there is something like this. Well, I try to deal with it myself, but I've probably already had this over the years of my career. Well, I've learned to deal with it. Many players have this, and Markus certainly does not suffer from it. He's not afraid to look like a fool if it's necessary, if he believes that this bluff shove without equity, without blockers, without everything, has positive expectation, and he feels that he needs to bluff. Markus will not be afraid to bluff. Probably what distinguishes him from other players is his good selection. He only plays those tables at which he has a significant advantage. At the same time, he plays well. He is a difficult opponent for everyone.